Alright, buenos dias, que tal amigos, John's Moto Garage. As always, welcome back to the channel. Today's the day of reckoning. Anyway, we're taking the Suzuki Boulevard M109R, and we'll talk a little bit about the bike. Is this the mother of all muscle bikes? Is it really as gnarly as they say it is? Who the heck would want to mob one of these bikes? Don't worry, we'll talk about all of that and more. The Boulevard M109R monster. Alright, let's jump on it. I'll admit my heart's racing, you guys. Every time I throw a leg over this thing, it's a little bit... Oh, that's cool. I haven't even gotten started and I'm already breaking stuff. Can the GoPro not handle this monster muscle bike? But before we jump into it, let's hit a little bit of a 0 to 60 here. Oh my gosh, dude, my heart's racing. Alright guys, the Boulevard M109R. Why the heck would anybody mob this motorcycle? We're going to talk a little bit about that. We'll do the ride review, impressions on the bike. We'll go over the goods and the bads. We'll go over why this bike might be the right bike for you, as well as why you may want to avoid this motorcycle at all costs. But let's start with the basics, right? So it's a 109 cubic inch. That's about an 1800 cc. 5-speed, liquid cooled. These are a shaft drive, and it falls into the category known as performance cruiser and or muscle cruiser, which to many would seem like an oxymoron, and you wouldn't be totally wrong, because you would think if you want a performance oriented bike, then you just go get a sport bike, and that if you'd want a cruiser, you just go get a cruiser. So you would almost think like this is the worst of both worlds in a sense. Man, this thing's a freaking monster. But it doesn't take long throwing a leg over and taking this bike for a quick spin to realize why somebody might be stoked on this motorcycle. Alright, so for starters, the thing is freaking massive. 109 cubic inch engine, 1800 cc, one of the large, definitely on the larger side as far as the motorcycle engines produced, especially at the time, starting out in 06 when they came out with this. You didn't have a ton. You had the Yamaha Roadster Warrior 1700, the VTX 1800, of course the Triumph Rocket, the monster rocket. You had the Yamaha Raider in 2008 that came out. So the Boulevard definitely groups in with all those other performance cruisers, the V-Rod, the V-Max, but it does stand out a little bit, and I think part of the reason why it stands out is because it comes from the Suzuki line, and I definitely think it has some inspiration from the Hayabusa, just with the lines on it. Personally, I've never been a huge fan of how the Hayabusa looks, the aesthetics, and I'm not really a huge fan of the lines on the Boulevard M109R either. A little bubbly for my taste. I feel like it's one of the bikes you either really dig how it looks or you don't, but you jump on and take it for a spin, and that may convince you to look past the aesthetics if you don't dig it. Their total torque monsters from idle up to like 7,500 RPMs at redline, it freaking pulls. It's not as sharp as the torque and response that you get with a sport bike, obviously, but it's just pure, consistent, seamless torque throughout, and that's what makes it a wicked fun bike to ride. And for how massive the bike is, starting with the 240 rear tire to the tank to the engine to the drag bars, it's just a real wide, girthy motorcycle. However, you jump on and it's deceptively agile and nimble for as big a looking as a motorcycle as it is. And a lot of that is because most of the bulk you see on it is actually a lot of plastic. It weighs in at around, like, I don't know, 750, 760 pounds, something crazy like that. So it is still a heavy bike by all means. But I remember still going back to the first time I ever rode one of these. The first thing, I remember loading it up into my truck, and I stalled it the first time and was wicked scared just because of how torquey it is. I mean, you see what I mean? You barely get on it, and it just pulls real hard. So that's one of the things that makes this bike wicked fun to ride. Despite how on paper overly overwhelming it may seem and how big a bike it is, a lot of people think that this bike kind of puts itself out of the market right there with like the Yamaha Raider and the VTX 1800 and some of those other options because it's so massive. And honestly, that I think is true to an extent, because your average typical rider getting into it, this is not going to be the best bike for you. So appearance wise, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I can see why people would like how it looks, because it's definitely unique looking. You don't see other bikes like this, so it is going to turn heads. You are going to have a lot of people asking you questions about it. As far as comfort goes, my big pet peeve, again, it's got forward controls with your drag bars and aggressive stance, but it's surprisingly comfortable for cruising around. It's not super aggressive. You do lean over the bar, over the tank slightly. I'm 5'8", so obviously if you're taller and have longer arms, that's not going to be as big of an issue. And one thing I was reading in one of the reviews that people say about this bike is it's good for going in straight lines. And why might that be, you might ask? Well, part of the reason is because you got that massive 240 rear tire, and so it's really not meant for going out and carving canyons and doing all that crazy stuff. Sorry, I just got to get off and take another look at this thing. What a beautiful bike. But with all the gobs of torque, like I said, from idle up to red line, it is such a blast. And I can see going in straight lines why it's so much fun, because you just get on it. It's like a red light to red light bike where you're just ripping around having a blast on it. Look at that thing. So again, that big question, why would anybody mob this bike around? Being such a big bike, you don't necessarily have the comfort you have with your cruiser. You don't have the performance that you have with your sport bike. So where does this bike fall into place? And I'm a believer there's a place for every bike out there and a person for every bike. And I think where Suzuki nailed it with this bike is you get that custom look. It's a head turner for sure. You get that wow factor with the appearance, but then also the ride itself, I think, lends itself to those who are transitioning from the sport bikes, not quite ready to get their quote-unquote old man cruiser, and they want something that's still just going to put a big smile on their face. And I think that's where the M109R, like I said, really hits the mark, because that's what you got. A performance cruiser, not quite as boring as your typical cruiser. You still get the fun factor, at least part of the fun factor you have with your sport bikes. This is not going to be a bike for touring and long distance. You know, obviously not built for that in mind, but this is the bike that you jump on and just have a complete blast mobbing around. So if your commute is 20-30 minutes, you know, 40 minutes, and this is the bike and you just dig the look and want to have a complete blast, then this bike hits the mark. Alright, so overall impressions of the bike. It's a complete monster, man. It really is. It's a fun bike to jump on, super torquey, and you're gonna have a blast hitting the drag strip, doing the straight runs on it, just getting on the gas. It's not gonna be as good for obviously hitting the canyons or all that good stuff, but for as big a bike as it is, it actually does pretty well, even at slow speeds, parking lots, all that kind of thing. Some of the things I'm not a huge fan of, lots of plastic, and with that, it just kind of gives it, in my opinion, somewhat of a cheap feel. Yeah, kind of a cheap feel to it. But I think all that torque really makes up for it. It's not going to be the best touring bike, not the most comfortable there, but for cruising around town, this thing is a monster, man. A monster. Some of the other dislikes, like I said, just kind of the tack and the speedo placement here. It really does not feel... Alright, let's see if I can finally get a 0 to 60. I really keep botching this. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Holy smokes. This thing is just redonkulous. I'm not gonna say how fast the bike ended up going. I'm just gonna spout out a number. 120, 230. Yeah, this thing's crazy. Holy smokes. So if that hasn't answered the question for you, then just to recap, the reason this may be the bike for you is if you happen to find yourself in that niche where you're looking for something that's still super powerful and just a complete monster. Maybe you want the biggest and the baddest looking, or maybe you just want something super gnarly. Maybe you're getting out of sport bikes and looking for something a little more comfortable, but you're not quite ready to retire to the, you know, Harley cruiser. Then this may very well be the bike for you. And like I said, you like it or you don't like it. As far as appearance goes, that just comes down to personal preference. But I don't think that you will be dissatisfied with the overall experience as far as just how freaking monstrous these motorcycles are. Whew. Alright, you guys, John's Moto Garage, I think that's going to do it. I think that wraps it up. As always, if you dig the content, por favor, like, subscribe, and we will hit you guys up on the next one. Nos vemos. Adios.